what makes them different from us is obviously like 7.7 watts per kilo for 20 minutes. Like, I'm not going to do that anytime soon. Almost no one is ever going to do that. But if you take that out of the equation, it's their ability to like synthesize information when going fast, specifically going fast downhill.
This is Andrew Vance, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, where I explore the obstacles people overcome to do great things with peak performers from business, sports, tech, the arts, the military, and more. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way. Before we roll, I want to say thank you to everyone who's left us an iTunes review. And if you haven't left us an iTunes review, please hit the link in the show notes. Take a second and leave a one-word review and hit 5 stars. I do this show because I love bringing you the stories of my guests, and I really appreciate you taking a second to support the show. Thank you. In the early 2000s, one of the freelance journalism gigs I enjoyed the most was writing Tour de France commentary for Fox Sports during the Lance and Floyd Landis eras. I love cycling and cycling journalism, and my guest is Spencer Martin, who is one of the hottest creative and business talents in cycling journalism today. Spencer is the founder of Beyond the Peloton. It's a freemium Substack and podcast that analyzes pro road racing at an unprecedented level of depth. I had a blast appearing on Spencer's podcast a while back, and I always enjoy hearing his take on what's happening in pro cycling. If you love bike racing too, I highly recommend you buck up and treat yourself to a subscription to Spencer's exclusive content at beyondthepeloton.substack.com. You can find that link in the show notes. And whether you're a pro cycling fan or not, you're going to dig this conversation. Spencer and I go deep on the business of sports, the future of content, the Tour de France, rim brakes, growing up in the Midwest, his journey from elite junior runner to entrepreneur, things that motorists have thrown at us while we're out riding our bikes, and much more.
Andrew was asking if he sounded like Terry Gross, and I said that the NPR has been podcasting long before we even knew what the medium was.
That's right. I do believe Terry Gross is a pioneer of the format, bringing some of the best content into the podcastiverse since then. Where do you think podcasting is going, Spencer?
It's great question. I fear, my concern is that I hope it does not turn into radio. I love NPR, big NPR fan, but I think they were good because they're so different from like commercial radio. And I think the commercial pressures are what make like particularly sports radio so bad. It's not interesting. It really doesn't reward interesting conversations or like moderation and any type of take. I get slightly concerned when Spotify is doing, Spotify. We have these big major players moving into what was like a really open medium. And I get a little concerned that it's just going to end up like blogging did. If you remember the early days of blogging, everything was open, people could make money. My concern is what happens if Apple and Spotify really start competing and they become, they're able to kind of programmatically put in ads and everything just gets like pinched down to the lowest common denominator.
Right. I
hope that doesn't happen. I also think there's a lot of room for growth. I mean, you think of even a really famous podcaster like Bill Simmons. I mean, how many people in my daily life know who Bill Simmons is? Probably not that many. So even the big stars are pretty niche still. And so there could be quite a bit of room for growth.
Yeah, I think there's definitely still room for growth, but you make a fantastic point, Spencer. And in a lot of ways, what you're describing, which is there's in media and content, there's often this cycle. Something starts out, it's disruptive, it's innovative, and then it's circular and it ends up becoming the thing it was disrupting. Like blogging in many ways did that. Blogging is, it's really a part of all mainstream forms of media in different ways. Podcasting over time potentially becoming more like radio. And it's just reminding me of what's happening with gravel racing. So do you see a parallel here? Is there a spirit of podcasting similar to a spirit of gravel?
There's definitely a spirit of podcasting. Definitely. Absolutely. It's just as hard. It's just as gnarly. We're definitely as cool as the people winning gravel races. I would say that for sure. But seriously, I do get concerned that it's this kind of endless cycle of like grassroots growth, disruption, consolidation, and then ultimately demise. But I mean, what's cool is the cycle starts over again. I mean, what are we going to be doing in 20 years instead of podcasting? Are we just going to, I don't even know. Will we just be beaming directly into people's brains and be like, whoa, check out this new thing. It's not like podcasting. It's just transcendental thoughts implanted into my head directly from a host. But yeah, I do get concerned that it will, probably the thing that concerns me the most is the ability to auction ads basically at light speed at unlimited supply. That's basically what's killed websites. That's why you don't go to a website unless you absolutely have to, because then any type of inefficiency or creativity gets bled out of a marketplace. And it's something I worry about a lot, actually, with, it's like, when will Google basically ruin the email inbox, and that will just become what Google search has become, where you search for something and it's an entire page of ads. And if you're a small player who's just creating good content, it's hard to get noticed in Google searches now.
I think you're onto something with biological technology, or the confluence of thought transmission and some kind of biological form of the transmission of those ideas. I'm thinking of the David Cronenberg movie Existence, starring Jude Law. I don't know if you remember that hit film.
I don't think I've seen this one.
Yeah, I mean, Cronenberg, of course, wow, one of my favorite filmmakers, but Existence was about this biological video game system that jacked into a port in your spine, and then you entered the world of the game and could physically feel what was happening in the game. Not quite the same as like an Elon Musk brain implant, neural implant type of thing, but I think that your prediction for 20 years from now is probably apt. We probably will be doing some kind of transmission and receiving of direct thought. But I mean, on that note, why are rim brakes dying in professional cycling?
This is a great question. Great question. I actually can't think of a more important question for the modern time. I'm a rim brake evangelist.
Same.
I never thought I would go to disc. Thought discs were so stupid. I should clarify. Mountain bikes, I think disc brakes are awesome.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that I ever rode rim brakes on a mountain bike. Kind of the same thing with tubeless, where just the tubeless technology on a mountain bike is much better. I think particularly because you can run such low pressures. I think tubeless gets complicated once you start increasing that pressure up towards 100 PSI. But with rim brakes on road bikes, I thought they were so dumb. Like, when have you ever really not had the stopping power, at least when it's dry on a road bike?
Sure.
But having said that, for racing many years on carbon rims, it is very poor in the wet. And I'd be coming down mountains in the wet and thinking like, well, I couldn't stop if I had to. Like, maybe this is a problem. And so over time, I did kind of start to warm up to the idea of, with disc brakes, you do have to have caustic hydraulic fluid coursing through your bike. If you want to travel with it, I would be concerned that it would rupture a brake line, and then you kind of have a big problem when you land. So for easy use, for changing wheels, rims, a lot better. Do I need more complication in my riding life? Probably not. I'm a big believer in the simpler your setup is, the more often you're going to get on it. The less repairs you have to do, the more often you're going to get on it and ride the bike. On the other hand, I'm getting addicted to wider tires on road bikes. I was one of those guys out there riding 19C tires in 2008, being like, this is speed. This is the pinnacle of speed right now.
Right.
I slowly moved up to 25, and then with the disc brakes, I think the best part is you can just put really big tires on your road bike. And I think you can go up to 20, 28, 30 millimeters and still be really fast on the road. I mean, potentially as fast, if not faster than with smaller tires. So that's kind of where I've landed, where I do ride a rim brake road bike, but I'm like disc curious. I think probably the next bike I get, it will be a disc, or next road bike I get will be a disc bike.
Yeah, and Spencer, I know that you're very well sourced within the world of professional cycling. I also know in season 2 of the Movistar documentary on Netflix, the riders clearly, like, they do not want to be on disc brakes, and they say that on camera, which kind of shocked me to hear some of the things they were saying about their equipment suppliers. But what are you hearing from inside the pro Peloton? What do riders actually want?
It's funny you say that. I was going to buy that bike that the Movistar team rides, and then I watched the season 2, and I was like, they were like, this is not a good bike. It's not made for disc brakes. It's terrible. And I didn't buy it because of that. I mean, Canyon cannot be too happy about that. I was shocked that was in there. As far as the pro Peloton, it's kind of this funny disconnect where I feel like fans and enthusiasts, we worry so much about the technology, like we obsess about it. I feel like the riders are almost like the least plugged in. I mean, some riders are really obsessive. Like Tony Martin was always really obsessed with his setup. Chris Froome is pretty obsessive. And actually, Chris Froome has come out publicly saying he doesn't like the disc brake bike they were given. He prefers rim brakes. I think it is like it's a smattering of opinions. We are seeing more off-road racers get into road racing, and they tend to be more pro disc brakes just because it's what they're used to. I just think some of that comes down to like rivalry, like kind of just the rivalry between road and off-road. I'm not sure if that's rooted in very much reality. It seems like, though, the riders, you just kind of ride what you're given and you're happy to have a bike sponsor. I don't think the rank and file is like sitting around reminiscing about the days of rim brakes, but I do find it interesting that once riders get a voice, it doesn't seem like many have come out and said, I really, really like disc brakes. I really like racing on them. Having said that, if you go back and watch the 2020 Tour de France, it does seem like Julian Alaphilippe was descending faster due to his disc brakes versus the rim brakes. So, despite what the riders say, and as much as it pains me to say it, it does seem like you could have like a material advantage descending on disc brakes versus rim brakes. Though, in my opinion, if you're braking on a descent while racing, you're doing something wrong. Like you really need to be railing that descent with minimum braking to really be competitive.
Yeah, that's one of the many things that blows my mind about professional cycling that I think the average fan or average person might not be aware of, but these riders do so many races every year, even if they, have a number of years in the world tour behind them. It's almost like in races, like they're sight reading music or they're on sighting a rock climbing route. Like in real time, they're having to navigate incredibly complex technical bike handling situations, read terrain. I mean, there's obviously also road furniture that they run into, but yeah, it's just pro cycling is an incredibly dangerous sport. It's statistically, as we know, more dangerous than being a race car driver, but just having to show up at work every day and do that, like under the pressure they're under, and being solo in front of the race is one thing. It brings a certain level of pressure, but being in a pack of 100 riders and doing that is also like pretty insane. Yeah,
I think this is a really good point you bring up, but what makes them different from us is obviously like 7.7 watts per kilo for 20 minutes. Like, I'm not going to do that anytime soon. Almost no one is ever going to do that. But if you take that out of the equation, it's their ability to like synthesize information when going fast, specifically going fast downhill. Like Mike Woods is one of the worst descenders in the professional peloton. Like, you watch him on TV, like how I could beat this guy in a downhill. I promise you, almost no one listening to this could beat Mike Woods on a downhill. Like, he is so much better than your average like local pro at descending and bike handling. It's shocking. And then once you get up to guys who are actually good at it relative to the professional Peloton, it's mind blowing how good at bike handling they are. And it's just, I guess it's kind of an unsatisfying answer for people, but I think a lot of it's just innate ability. Obviously practice helps, but there's just something slightly different about them where it's coming at them so fast. Like, I've never seen this technical descent. I'm going down it at race speed. I'll figure it out on the way. Like, I don't think I could do it. Like, and I'm pretty good at bike handling. I ride my bike all the time, and it's never going to happen. Like, that ability to, kind of like being an F1 driver, like what makes someone a good F1 driver? It's like, it's kind of these innate processing skills that most people just don't have.
I think, isn't it that you can tap a bunch of lights on a wall in front of you rapidly?
Yeah.
Like, I always like, I've thought about like, can I get a setup at my house where I put the tap lights in front of me? I could like have my wife activating them. We could trade off. She could tap the lights. We could both become, world-class cognitive performers, I think. But
I was telling my wife we should all start our days how they warm up for their races. Like, we got to be doing the tap lights. Like, we got to have a physio come in and stretch us out. And then, like, we're ready to meet the challenges of the day.
Yeah, that. And then you have to have a TheraBand that you're doing some weird, somebody's pulling your arm over here. I think that's a great idea. And, when you think about just cycling generally, what do you find to be compelling about it? Why is it interesting?
That's a really good question. Why invest so much time and energy into what is ostensibly a very silly sport? I find it so, I think growing up, I grew up in a very American place, super conservative, super American, dismissive of anything that was foreign, anything that was different. So initially, I loved I grew up a Europhile just because it was so different to my surroundings. And like, I loved how like the society and history of the countries and the regions were reflected in these races. It's almost like a little window into a different world that, you get to see. Like, with these Italian races, they kind of tell the story of the unification of these kingdoms and coming together as a country. And then you go to, the Giro d'Italia goes through South Tyrol and they speak German, and you're like, well, that's odd. And you're like, oh, well, you found out that it was given to Italy after they switched sides in World War I from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And you're just kind of learning these little factoids and like how people live and what the societies are like and what's happened in the past through these races. I think that's initially what drew me to it. And what still draws me to it. And then I also find the racing so compelling. It's like chess played out at warp speed on the roads, where you have like the physical component. It's just physically difficult to ride a bike really fast. But the fact that, you have to be so tactically astute. Where I grew up a runner, I was like running at a high level in middle school and in high school. And running's like, there is a tactical element, but it's so straightforward compared to cycling, where I was really drawn to like the added level of depth as far as tactics and strategy went.
Where did you grow up, Spencer?
So I went to high school in Lawrence, Kansas, which is close to your hometown of Kansas City. It's very much part of like the Eastern Kansas KC Metro culture, which is very different from, I grew up in Western Kansas in a town called Smith Center. It was like, close to the Nebraska border, but they talk about like Walmart coming in and destroying small towns. Like, we wished we could have been destroyed by a Walmart. Like, we had to drive like 3 hours to get to a Walmart. Like, that's how small it was and how remote it was.
Wow.
And if you like saw like a 4-lane highway, you'd like come back and tell people about it. Like, well, I saw the interstate today. Like, no way. Like, that's crazy. So it was incredibly remote. And really it was just like books, and we had like basic not even satellite, just like antenna TV. So any book I could get my hand on, especially if it was about Europe or something different, I was immediately into.
So you only read on microfiche at the library?
I read a lot. Yes. Yeah. It's crazy, but yeah, a lot of my days, just free time, was spent just I'd read like the Wall Street Journal that way at the library. And then got like really into financial markets because it was just like, wow, the journal, like what's Wall Street? That's in New York. Look at these funny little pixelated author images, and then would become obsessed with certain Wall Street Journal authors. So it was a very interesting way to grow up.
So were those kind of like your dual obsessions growing up? Was it finance and cycling?
I'd say like finance and sports in general. Like we would get College Game Day, which is like the college show, the pre-show for college football. And like, I would make my parents pick me up from sleepovers to like go home and watch it, because I was worried my friends wouldn't be plugged in enough to what the analysts were saying. And so it's like, like I would be like outside at 8 a.m. ready to get picked up and brought home to watch my College Game Day. I mean, I was just almost to the point now where if I was the parent of myself as a child, I'd be like, are you okay? Like, do we need to take you to a therapist? Like, this is an obsession with sports.
That's wild. And so what drew you into cycling? I mean, you mentioned that European connection, but like what got you on a bike and riding?
Yeah. So that's like the lamest answer ever. Like Lance Armstrong. I was a child of the Armstrong boom, where I was 12 or 13 in 99 when he won the Tour. And like, I didn't know what the Tour de France was. Like, it's like, why are they with a yellow jersey? Like it's embarrassing. I thought it was like some type of like cancer event. I thought it was like a fundraising ride for cancer. And then just kind of learned more. And I was like, well, I got to learn more about this event. Like, what's going on here? And then I was probably consuming the publications that you were working for at the time. Any type of cycling publication I get my hands on, I would read, and just followed the kind of the Ulrich Armstrong battle as it was happening throughout the years. It's actually, people forget, like, we've all moved on from Lance so much that it was like a big part of our lives, like 7 years of Tour wins, and then just kind of happening in the background of everything. And I got like I had like a Pacific, I think they were called like Pacifica or like a Pacific. It was like this bike you could buy at Walmart, and would just go out, and we didn't have paved roads. We just have like endless gravel roads, probably not safe to be out on as a kid, because if something happens to you, you're just in the middle of nowhere. No one's ever going to find you. But I would like watch Lance at the Tour and then like go out and ride on my crappy Walmart bike on these gravel roads. So in many ways, I did invent gravel cycling. I do want to take credit for that. I will look out for those royalty checks from Unbound any day. And then I read a book called, I don't know if you've read, it's a very good book called The Death of Marco Pantani. And that kind of blew my mind, because I was like, whoa, like there's other races that aren't the Tour de France. And there was like this whole other era before Lance, and just kind of the whole scene of Italian cycling specifically, like really drew me in. And at that point I started kind of going back, and there's this great company called World Cycling Productions, and you could buy DVDs and you could watch like any race. Actually, I think it's kind of, people talk about like, we have iPhones and everything you ever want is on your phone, but there's like this entire generation of content that's just getting lost as we migrate away from older technology, where it's like, yeah, like if I want to watch the 1992 Ghent-Wevelgem, like how do I do that? Like hopefully it's on YouTube, but that back catalog was so accessible with World Cycling Production DVDs. So I would just like buy these DVDs online, they would come in the mail, and then I'd be like sitting in the living room, like taking notes, watching like the 1994 Giro d'Italia. And there's just great characters like Pavel Tonkov, where it's like, what's this Russian guy doing in Italy? And he's like, he's so unshakable, and Pantani's so emotional. And it just, I think the window into cultures and the personalities of the riders really, it was really drew me in.
Was 92 Ghent-Wevelgem, was that the race where the Gevis team had 3 riders just ride up the road and drop everyone riding at like 45 RPM?
Yes, this was, yeah, I think that was like the beginning of the EPO era, and some teams and some riders had access to EPO and some didn't, and we got to see some pretty spectacular performance at those spring classics. I think one year Roubaix, I think Mape swept the podium, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, 92. That was like the Jello blood era. I think people's hematocrits were so high. For some riders, it was incredibly dangerous. It's also good to hear that you invented gravel. Of course, the follow-up question is, what is the spirit of gravel?
Yeah, I can't think of anyone more. I'm obsessed with gravel. I think about it all the time. I do. I mean, I like to rag on gravel, and I think it's funny that in my mind they're like, it'd be like, it's kind of like when white European explorers like discovered the Pacific Ocean. Be like, wow, no one's ever laid eyes on this. It's like people have been here since the beginning of time, looking at this Pacific Ocean. Like, what are you talking about? I kind of feel like gravel is in some ways like that, where it's like, can you believe there's non-paved roads that you can race on? But I do really respect the gravel scene, and that I think it has widened the aperture of who's interested in cycling, who can be interested in it. And it's all these really cool places that would never embrace cycling. Like we were a peek behind the curtain, just recording my podcast, talking about Emporia, Kansas, in no way was a cycling hub. You would be chased out of town for being spotted in spandex on a bike 20 years ago. And now, like, that's got to be one of the big economic engines of the community, is this massive race they have every year. So the fact that it's like getting these, I guess for like the lack of a better term, like red state locations, like introducing them into cycling and introducing the cyclists to the great roads there that are available to ride. And the community, I think the community aspect is so cool, that you're there. I think that's what I worry about with the UCI coming into gravel, where it's like, okay, we've all seen this movie before. Like, all right, it's a UCI event. You have to be UCI licensed. You got to be a quote unquote pro to race. It's 100 people. Everyone else is just watches. And then over time, it just kind of kills the event and kills the spirit of it. I love that it's everyone. It's like 3,000 people in downtown Emporia starting the race together. I think that's so cool. And that you get to ride the same course as the pros, and you get to see how much faster they're going than you. I think that's something that I don't think is really necessary at tippy top World Tour racing, but I think it's something that's missing from a lot of cycling, where it's just like, growing up in Kansas, meeting a pro cyclist seemed impossible. But I was always just fascinated, like, how much faster are they riding than us? Like, how could this be possible? So I think that's so cool that people are just out there on the same roads as the pros, getting to compare themselves.
Jumping back to Pantani for a moment, was the Carrera acid wash denim bibs, were those the coolest bibs ever in professional cycling?
Yes. And I think that actually everything's connected so far, where if you showed up to a gravel race in that kit, Rafa could not keep it in stock if they introduced that to sell to gravel racers now. Yes, I do think the Carrera, and it's not Carrera Marble, I assume, or is that?
I always thought it was. I believe it is a jeans company. I believe Carrera was a jeans company, and that's why they were acid washed like jorts, because they have like their pockets on there.
Yes,
everything connects back to jeans. Again, like we recorded an episode for Spencer's podcast. We were talking about what a big role jeans played in domestic American cycling around 2006, 2008. You can go listen to that episode to find out more. Find the link in the show notes. But yeah, Pantani, he had the acid wash power just helping him blast up the mountain.
And that probably explains a lot of his success as a racer. The acid wash kits. There is like a lot of his, it was like this Italian, hard to explain if you're not like following the Italian kits of the 90s. I would say like undeniably ugly. So like first impression, these are the ugliest kits I've ever seen. This is crazy that they're riding on them, but like also in some ways attractive. Like, and now that Rafa's made like the plain, the plain kit so popular, I do wonder if like, to go back to the theme of everything cycling, like, are we just going to go back to like the loud sponsors everywhere, blue, like it was the classic thing would be like your leg warmers were some bright color like blue, and then your kits would also be blue, which now would never be allowed in the after the Rafaization of cycling.
Yeah, I think that the ugliest kits ever had to be either, I think Castorama, which was Fignon's team after Super U, System U. I think Castorama had the ugliest kits ever, and Buckler Beer might have been second.
Do you think I think Kelme is a sleeper pick?
I kind of like the Kelme kit.
This is, I think, yeah, it's like one man's trash is another man's treasure with these kits. Where I might wear the Carrera jeans kit. I think that could be popular if you brought it back.
I think it could be huge. I actually think it's what's next in this podcast. It starts here. It starts now. It starts with the acid wash denim. You know, I know you mentioned that that Pantani book had a big impact, but where did your cycling career, so to speak, like take you? How did you get into racing, and then how did that merge with your interest in writing and becoming a content creator with your own empire?
That's a generous use of the term empire. I was like really into, I was actually kind of like pre-puberty, like I was just bad at sports, just bad at everything. And then I just remember one day being like, I'm sick of this. Like I suck at everything. And I was like it was like a cold, like January day. And I just went to the track by myself. I must've been young. Like I'm like 10 years old. I was like, and I had watched this movie called Prefontaine, which is a bad movie it's a really interesting story. Not a good movie at all. There's a better movie called Without Limits about Steve Prefontaine. And I just started doing like just would run a mile on the track. And then the next day would go and try to like run it faster and then try to do it faster. And eventually, like in a year, I was like winning like national competitions for like middle school running. And then went to, as I lived in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. And I just remember thinking like, I'm like 12. I'm like, my upside potential is really limited by this location. I got to get out of here. I got to get to a city. There was a great track coach in Lawrence, Kansas called Steve Heffernan. He coached at Lawrence Free State, which was like a newer high school, just opened, had a really good middle distance program. So I like convinced my parents. I was like, I got to go. Like, I'm moving, like 13 at the time. I'm like, I'm moving across the state. I think I can the coach can like find some house for me to live in, and I'm just going to be running at this high school. And my parents like blinked first. And so we all moved to Lawrence, Kansas, was running in high school. That was a big part of my identity at the time. I think looking back, I probably was, I have like really conflicted emotions about like how big sports should be in a kid's life, where I probably gave up a lot just to focus on running. Because I was like, I remember like the Beijing, it was announced the 2008 Olympics would be in Beijing. I'd be like, well, that's where I'll be in 2008. Like, never been to China. I'm excited to see what it's like. And
that's awesome. I love it.
I was young. I was like 13 at the time. And as like a freshman, I almost won state in the mile as a freshman. I remember I was like disappointed. I was like, God, this is a crushing disappointment. And I had a great sophomore year. And then I just there was like, instability at home. I started to like probably burn out mentally because I had been training hard since I was 10. And, really was just struggling. I was partying a lot, got into kind of like, punk rock elements at my school. And at the time it was good because I was meeting different people that weren't just on sports teams. But and it was a college town. So there was like a lot of entertainment available that probably wasn't age appropriate for a high schooler. And, really, I just I didn't really improve because I was like, when you're hungover on like a Tuesday as a 15-year-old, that's going to affect your performance. And went to college, joined a fraternity. And I was a mess at the time. I have no memory of applying to the University of Kansas. I still to this day am not convinced I applied. I think I just showed up and started attending classes and they were like, let me go. And I actually was lucky enough to get into, it was a pretty good fraternity that and I have mixed feelings about fraternities. I didn't love my time there, but it was super structured. So the first semester, you're like, no TV, you're studying, you get like 30-minute breaks during the day for like fun time, or you can go to the gym. And that like really kind of got me back on the right path. I like got to college and like stopped partying as much. And, and then after like a couple of years, it's like, I would love to get back into like, running, but maybe that's not so fun because running is kind of boring. I was like, I always wanted to ride a bike, but I just couldn't afford it. Like, trying to convince your parents to buy you a road bike, like an expensive road bike in high school, like they're just not going to do it at most income levels. And I just went to like a store and got like a cheap bike, like $150 steel framed road bike. I went out. I remember I was in bike shorts and I was like getting harassed. Like probably it was unsafe. It was a different time in America. I don't think like, looking back, I am like surprised I just didn't get beat up by like a car of people, but just started riding a lot. I remember it was the 2008 Tour de France. Carlos Sastre won, which looking back was probably a disappointing race for a lot of people, but I was like, this is so cool. Like, this is such a great race. And then I found out you could race, which blew my mind. Like, what? You can race bikes in Lawrence, Kansas? This is nuts. So it's like I went out, there's all these like race series out by the lakes there, and like showed up and won the race. And I was like, whoa, like this is pretty cool. Like you can win and you get money. Like this is interesting. And then, for the next few years, like that was my new obsession, was just, learning everything about bike racing wherever I could, traveling just insane distances. I mean, when you're in the Midwest racing, it's like Chicago, that's only 9 hours. That's pretty close. Like, let's go up and race this weekend. And quickly went from like Cat 5 to, Cat 3, like in like a couple months, and then eventually Cat 2. And then I was like a little bit out of my depth, kind of fell out of racing for maybe a year, or riding at all for like a year, got kind of out of shape by the time I was graduating. And I remember thinking like, I could go to like New York and work in finance, which is what I've wanted to do my whole life. Like, can you imagine being a junior analyst at JP Morgan? Like, what an exciting job that would be. But I was like, I just remember thinking like, I'll be dead by the time I'm 40. I'll be so unhealthy and I knew myself that if I moved to New York, I would not make time for being fit. I would not be healthy at all. And I was sick of the cold. Kansas is so cold. And I'd never been to Hawaii. And I was like, asked a friend, I'm like, have you ever been to Hawaii? And he's like, yeah, I went on vacation there a lot as a kid. And I was like, what island? He's like, Maui. And I was like, all right, I'm moving to Maui. This was like a month before I left school. So it's like, I really had no plan. And reached out to, there used to be this great cycling blog, stevetilford.com. He's like tragically passed away since then. And Steve was like a big influence in my riding. He was from Topeka, but he would like ride. He was always in Lawrence on bike rides. He was a big figure in the cycling community there. And he had gone to Maui and done a ride. This company will like ride with you up the volcano and then you descend down. And I just emailed the owner, and asked like, hey, can I come be a guide for you? And he said yes. And we just had like one phone call, and he said, yeah, just flying out and you can work for me. And I bought a one-way ticket to Maui, didn't know anyone there except this guy I just talked to on the phone. And he picked me up at the airport. And then I showed up and I got in really good shape because I was riding all the time for my job. And then when I started to come back to the mainland to race, I was just like a completely different racer. And then kind of got the thought of like, well, maybe I could like do this full time. Like maybe I could be a professional cyclist. And then I had like a multi-year period where like, that's all I cared about. And I got to like a mild level of success. It was not, you get to a point where like Travis McCabe would have been like the best case scenario for me. And like Travis McCabe is so good. And he had like a cup of coffee in the world tour. And then now he's retired. It just gets so hard unless you're so talented or European and you're kind of able to plug into those races at a young age. It's just so difficult to really make a living doing it.
That's a pretty incredible journey. And when you were in the middle of that, when did you have that realization that this wasn't going to be your future?
I don't know if I'll probably deep down, I'm like, maybe I will win the next year's Tour de France. Make a comeback. I had a bad crash. I think it was 2015, and I had moved to Boulder, Colorado. I was doing these super fancy cycling camps. Ryder Hesjedal he was a big star at the time. This was like before the doping stuff came out, and he would host. It was like 20 people. We'd put them up at the Four Seasons. They were paying like $20,000 a week for it. And then we'd do rides around the island with like Ryder Hesjedal and Tyler Farrar. And one of the clients owned like an amateur racing team in Colorado, which had like good support. Like you got a stipend, you got a bike, you got free kits, you got to go to the races for free. And he was like, hey, if you want to come, and like a lot of credit to Ryder, a lot of credit to the owner of the bike tour company. They kind of like went to bat for me with this guy and were like, he's a good rider. Like you should take him on. And the guy's like, yeah, if you move to Colorado, you can be on my team. So I moved to Boulder in 2013 and then was just racing like a lot. But in 2015, I thought I was in great shape. Like, you're always looking for that breakout season. I imagine it's like this in any sport where you're kind of on the cusp where you're like, this is the year I'm going to bat 400 and I'm going to get brought from AAA to the major leagues. I thought I was in good shape. Was off the front of a crit with one other guy. Like we probably would have won the race. And it was a dumb crash. I was just pedaling through a corner, just probably a little desperate for some extra power. And, I didn't slide out. I kind of went over the handlebars and like kind of endoed onto my head. And I had like a compound fracture in my collarbone. Ugh. And this was like a week before Tulsa Tough. And I was like, I'm going to go win Tulsa Tough. I'm going to win all 3 races at Tulsa Tough. And it's going to be awesome. But it was like the season was done right there. I had to get surgery the next day. And I think I've never quite been as into it since then. I just remember like the fire kind of dying a little bit where I was like, oh, this is serious. Like, and I put a lot of work into this and got nothing out of it. And I think if I was if I was just more about that life, I would have been like, no, like I'm going to come back and like, this will be the beginning, like the opening part of the championship DVD. But it did just kind of break my spirit a little bit. But what happened is I was just laid up all July. So I just watched every stage of the Tour de France. Like basically I would wake up at like 4 when it started. It would finish at 9 and then I would go to my job at 9. But it like opened my eyes up to like what you could observe watching races. And I noticed all these things guys were doing wrong that I probably wouldn't have noticed when I was as into racing. So that was kind of the beginning of me going from being all in on racing to being like, well, like, analyzing races is pretty interesting and you can notice a lot if you just pay attention. And I did race after that, but I don't think I was ever quite as into it. And then now with Strava, I'm glad because it's like, I can't do the watts per kilos these guys are doing. Like the power it takes and how light you have to be at the front of a World Tour race is so insane that retroactively, I'm glad I kind of never went all in after that.
How did that lead to you doing what you're doing now?
So at the time I was like working at the Pros Closet, which they at the time sold like used bike stuff on eBay, but it was an interesting job for me because we would go to teams, buy their old stuff, sell it on eBay. So you get to meet a lot of people that knew a lot about cycling. And even a lot of the people like Sean Sullivan worked with me and he was on Barlow World back in the day. He was on like the Toyota United team, really good racer, really smart about cycling. And we would just talk all day, every day about races. Like, oh, what'd you see this morning? What did you see this morning? Like, what do you think this guy did wrong? And so after a year of that, I was like, I was voracious consumer of like Velo News and cycling tips at the time. And I remember being like, I think I could be writing about this. And I just emailed Neil Rogers, like a pitch idea, who was like like a celebrity to me at the time. I was like nervous to email him, and he's like, yeah, sure, write it, and I'll pay you some money. And which blew my mind. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm going to be in cycling tips. This is nuts. Wrote the piece. It was very hard. Neil was like, yeah, I think you got a long ways to go before you could like, really hone your craft, but you should keep doing it. And then I wrote, I just kind of was regularly writing pieces for cycling tips, and then kind of moved over to Velo News. And I was at like jobs that were mildly interesting, but not that fulfilling. And I remember I was kind of like fighting for a promotion at the job I was at. This must have been 2018. And I was thinking like, well, if I get this, like, am I even going to be happy? And like, if anything, I'll have to. And at the time I was writing quite a bit about cycling. So it's like, I'd be like in the parking lot on my computer in my car, like working on pieces while taking a break from work. And that's what I wanted to be doing full time. Like, I wanted just to be at home, breaking down the races and telling people what was going on. And it just kind of had a realization where I was like, I think I got to leave my job if I want to pursue this more. And I did. And then I started this blog called beyondthepelotonblog.com. And I was really into, treating cycling like it was a real sport instead of like fandom journalism, to be doing, like I'm a big fan of like Zach Lowe or Nate Duncan with basketball, like the way they break it down, and just kind of wanted to bring the same level of like seriousness and analytics and, strategy discussion to cycling. And, I look back at those old posts and they're rough. It's like kind of embarrassing to read, but like the kernel of the idea was there. And then, I don't know where I got the idea. Like, I always read Ben Thompson's newsletter, Stratechery, and he would give you a free one once a week, and he would give a paid subscribers more posts. And we're thinking like, I wonder if this would work for cycling. And COVID hit. I was doing some like other consulting work, not to do with cycling, and it kind of dried up due to the initial COVID shock. And I was thinking like, maybe that's not the worst thing that could ever happen. And I'll just, when racing starts, I'll break down the Tour de France every day, and I'll just see how I feel at the end of the tour. And I did, and just kept going, because then the Giro started, then the Vuelta started, and I kept doing it. The response was good. The newsletter, it grew a lot better than I thought it would. And then now I'm here. So it wasn't, I didn't sit down and I was like, I'm going to start like a newsletter where I break down cycling every day. It just kind of gradually grew from the initial blog idea.
Has it exceeded what you thought might be possible for this concept? Or is it about, is this about how you thought it would go?
I think it's exceeded. I mean, I kind of thought, I'll do this for free for a year and just see where I am after that. But then I also didn't want to give people Tour de France daily coverage for free and then take it away in a year. I was worried that, I'm always a big believer in like, if you're getting something for free and then you have to pay for it, it can leave a bad taste in your mouth. So it's like, I probably have to charge for this, at least for the daily coverage every day. Totally expecting no one to sign up, like not a single person. But that was not the case. I mean, it was far more successful in that first year than I thought it would be.
What's been the hardest part about doing it for you?
I think the hardest part is, I have a wife and a son, and I think it can be on the weekends sometimes. And I'm like, keep quiet. I'm watching the race. And then I have to like run upstairs and I'm like breaking down like little video clips. It can be like, what am I doing? Like, I could just be hanging out with the family in the backyard. But, that is also, I think that type of life is more for, obviously you always want work-life balance. And I do think I found a good way to balance it, especially on the weekends in the summer when it can be difficult. But, if you want to work, I have friends that are like higher up at big companies, and, they don't do that much on the weekends. It's kind of a nice work-life balance they have. But, to me, that work is a little bit, I'm so lazy when I'm not interested in something, when I'm not totally bought in. It would be so hard for me to be just like a middle manager at kind of a generic big company that I think my work, I would think it would be a bad job that I would also be bad at. So, for me, it's almost like this is the only thing that I could really be that passionate about, at least at the moment. So that helps me kind of power through what can be a difficult work-life balance at times.
Yeah, and Spencer, I know I've shared with you, and I think I might have said it already, but I love the content that you put out. The depth of it, the breadth of it, the level of analysis is incredible. And I mean, everything you've described about your history in the sport, your deep understanding of strategy, tactics, your personal experience, I think, with what it actually feels like to do this or try to do this at the highest level really comes through. And, every time I get the subscriber newsletter, the level of depth and detail is such that I'm like, how did you turn this around? Like between that race ending yesterday and when this landed in my inbox today with all the, the video clips that you do, the level of analysis, like how much time is going into putting together something like that for, a major one-day race or a stage of a tour?
It's funny you say it's quick, because I'm always like, God, I'm behind. Like, it's too slow. This is too slow. It probably rule of thumb is it like takes twice as long as you think it's going to take. But I try to, I was on vacation doing the Vuelta this year with my family. So I was trying to be a little bit more mindful of the time. But, normally, like if I'm at home, I'll watch a stage of the Tour de France. Let's say it finishes at 9:30. I might try to go for a bike ride until like 11, just to kind of like think about the race, think about what's happened. And then ideally, I like to get that piece out by 3 or 4. My son wakes up from his nap at like 4:30, so that's kind of my endpoint. This summer, I really, at least when I was on vacation for the Vuelta, I really had to like crunch it. So I'd almost be spending no more than like 2 hours at the computer. I'd set like a 2-hour timer and be like, you got to get this done in 2 hours. And if you're not happy with it, like tough luck, send it out. So I do try to do it as quickly as I possibly can.
You seem to have access to a lot of information from inside of teams, different like writer agents. I don't know where your information comes from or if you can talk about it, but I am really curious. Like you said, you're watching the races unfold in real time. You also have a level of insight and access, or at least it feels like that from the outside. Can you talk at all about where are you getting your information from?
What's interesting about that is it's almost a lot of people come to me. Like people reach out and be like, you said this, I think you're missing this piece of information that you should know. And a lot of times it's rider agents, just because they have the time during races to be paying attention. The riders themselves, aren't paying attention as much, but
right.
Riders, it's a lot of people will just like reach out, like Twitter direct message and be like, hey, you said this, I think you should know this detail. So it's really a mix of like stakeholders, and you would be shocked at the amount of team managers that reach out to me. I would say I have a good portion of the Peloton's managers as paying subscribers, and they definitely let me know when they think I've gotten something wrong. And sometimes I disagree with their takes, but sometimes it's valuable, like added information.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it's not easy to cultivate sources at that level, and I think it speaks to the quality of the product you're putting out and the level of respect that it's commanding. So, that's awesome. Congratulations. And as you think about where you're going to take the project next, or like where you're headed with this, as you noted, when you're a solopreneur, it can be challenging to find work-life balance. Also, when you're doing what you love, that does make it a bit more palatable, I think. But over time, what's the plan?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. It is hard, it's a hard grind when you're by yourself. I do think the freedom, though, energizes me. Like, I could be difficult to do it for someone else. The smart play would be like, my basement's just a cube farm, and there's like 15 people down there constantly watching races and ghostwriting for me. Like if I was actually building a business, that's like what I would do. But, I do want it to be personal. So it is hard for me to ever imagine just like someone else is riding beyond the Peloton. That doesn't feel right. I do think I would like to expand, either bulk up myself and expand out into like, I love watching F1. I'm often like, well, I don't understand the sport that enough. I need someone to tell me like what the heck just happened. Like, I wish I was getting like an F1 breakdown in my inbox or via podcast. So I would love to like expand out where I'm like servicing other passionate communities that maybe are a little bit ignored by at least English language mainstream media. A strategic sale or partnership could be something I would consider. I've been approached by a few bigger, some legacy, some upstart cycling media companies. I'll let people come to their own conclusions about what that could be. About things as far, like an outright sale to, some type of integration of the membership. So, I think it could be fun, at least some type of podcast partnership where, kind of my dream is to be like, to be partnered with someone really smart, like Marco Panatti, or even he's controversial. People don't like him, but I think Johan Bernil is like a genius when it comes to cycling tactics. Like, I would love to have a podcast with Johan Bernil. I think that would be so fun. Like the dumbest guy in pro cycling and the smartest guy in pro cycling. And I'm just like grilling him about what the heck's going on and why I disagree with, maybe his particular take on something. So I do think, some type of podcast partnership would be something I would seriously consider. I'm a little bit more protective of the newsletter, though. It feels a little bit more like my baby. So I am having a hard time wrapping my head around like selling it and then just becoming a writer for some company. That's kind of what I wanted to avoid in the first place. So to answer your question, I don't really have a good answer. I do know that I would like to expand and maybe hire some support staff in the future, though.
You mentioned that Pantani book is what, that was one of the original catalysts that really got you into competitive cycling. When you think about, the canon of books about or by professional cyclists, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I feel like someone asked me this yesterday. I feel like I'm like a fraud with cycling books. I don't know. I mean, I love Slaying the Badger by I think Richard Moore is the author. It's about the battle between Bernard Hinault and Greg LeMond, and I believe the 1986 Tour. I almost, though, am drifting. There's also there's this book called like Greg LeMond's Cycling Tactics, I think. It's very good. It's like kind of cheesy, but a lot of stuff in there is like a lost art, I feel, where it's like attack into corners, where I don't think people do that anymore. I don't think people really sit down and think about like the basics of cycling 101, even riders who are very good. Like, I don't want to point anyone out, but like maybe a young American who is racing in the World Tour maybe is like never been told this. It's possible.
I feel like you actually do want to point someone out, but you don't have to.
I don't.
Yeah.
I would feel, because I don't know if they know that or not.
Yeah, it's cool.
And I will say, I thought Quinn Simmons was outfoxed by a more experienced, older rider. I believe that was stage 18 of this year's Vuelta a España, where you can see Quinn Simmons is a 20-year-old American who, 20 is really young to be racing in the World Tour. So any success is impressive, but you could tell like, oh, this guy just got like Valgren knew what he was doing and he just kind of worked him over. Kids should go back and watch that, learn what not to do. But there's this guy, he's a writer called John Foote. He writes about Italian cycling, but almost it's the cycling's like the second part. He's just kind of like an Italian historian kind of, and he'll write books about how sports kind of frame Italian history. John Foote is definitely one of my idols as far as writers go and what he can tell you about a larger issue when it comes to a sport. And then I feel like, maybe I don't read enough sports books. All I've been reading I'm obsessed with, I only read about like Weimar Germany, the fall of the Weimar Republic before Nazism. That's like my obsession at the moment. I have little time for reading about cycling. I do feel like, I don't know if there's this guy, John Feinstein, he would like embed himself with like a basketball team for a year and then write about the team. I think maybe because cycling is predominantly not an English language sport. There's probably books like that out there about cycling, but I'm just not aware of them in an English translation.
There's like a certain kind of book about the professional cycling experience. And I think just an aspect of professional cycling I personally am really drawn to, which is the journeyman or journeywoman rider grinding away. And I like Phil Guyman's books for that reason. Charlie Wagelius's book I found to be really compelling. And I can't remember the name of the writer, but Dog in a Hat. That yeah. Like I love that like genre of just people who are, domestiques or journeyman riders and like what it takes to get to that level. And as you pointed out, the physiology and ability to tap the lights on the wall and like process information just to be at that level is insane. Like there are so few athletes that can get to that level in pro cycling, even relative to the most elite level in all other sports. There just aren't that many slots at the world tour level. And, only a handful of those riders actually ever get to win a race, but they need everybody else to do it. And I find the stories about what people sacrifice to get into that position and do overtime to be there to be insane. But I'm looking forward to checking out the books that you mentioned. I also wanted to give a shout out to that the Thomas Pren book, Racing Tactics for Cyclists. I don't know if you're a fan of that one, but that's another racing strategy and tactics book that I dig. I'm going to go pull that Le Mans one out again now too.
I should say, I can't believe I didn't mention it. It's called The Rider by Tim Crabbe.
Oh yeah.
Tim Crabbe. That's like a pantheon cycling book. If you're like a person interested in racing bikes, like that book sums up the mentality perfectly.
You mentioned when you first started riding in Lycra I think it was in Lawrence, or whenever you started riding in Lycra when you were like 15, it felt kind of dangerous. And I can tell you when I started doing that myself in Kansas City in the late 80s, it wasn't a super common thing. What can you describe did you ever have things thrown at you from vehicles while you were riding your bike?
Yeah, I feel like I'm cheating. You've said this in a previous conversation, but yeah, the big gulp is like I think that is the staple to throw at cyclists.
Yeah, I agree. The big gulp, particularly when it's filled with. Why am I spacing out on? Slurpee, like the big gulp Slurpee. Yeah. That's like kind of like a refreshing hit to take on like 100-degree day in the Midwest. When you get like the Coke Slurpee thrown at your face. But that was a big, because Hawaii has a reputation as like, it is a rough place. It's a tough place. Like, if you do the wrong thing, like no one will hesitate to just beat you up, to like show you what you did wrong. But going there and like people were so much nicer on the roads than I was used to in Kansas. I really couldn't believe it. Nice. So Spencer, if people want to learn more about you, find out more about what you're doing, or subscribe to the newsletter, where do they go?
You can go to beyondthepeloton.substack.com to sign up for the newsletter. And that should be a hub for any other content. There is the Beyond the Peloton podcast, should be everywhere. You can get a podcast, Spotify and Apple at least.
Awesome. And all you Apple listeners, go find that. I'll put the link in the show notes. Hit subscribe. Give Spencer 5 stars. Spencer, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome to hear a bit more about your journey, and thanks so much for the content that you're bringing into the world. It's great.
Well, thanks for taking the time to read and listen, Andrew, and thanks for having me on. It was great to be here.
If you have questions, comments, feedback, or want to suggest a guest, please reach out to @HardwayPod on social or email me at choosethehardway@gmail.com. Please take a moment to leave a 1-word review and hit 5 stars in iTunes. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way.